You see, most people wait for the money before they act rich, before they think rich, before they allow themselves to dream big. They say, when I have the money, then I'll think differently. When I have the resources, then I'll see opportunities. When I get the break, then I'll act bold. But that's not how it works. That's never how it works. The truth is, every billionaire, every self-made person who started with nothing, they began with a mindset long before the results showed up. They carried a vision of themselves that was so much larger than their circumstances, so much bigger than their current reality, that the world had no choice but to bend in their favor. And if you're broke right now, if you're struggling, if you feel like you're at the bottom, listen carefully. This is where it starts. This is the fertile ground where greatness is born, because the mind is the first place wealth is built. You don't need money to start thinking like someone who has it. You don't need a fancy car to walk with confidence. You don't need a mansion to live with gratitude and abundance. You can train your mind to operate as if you're already there, because that mindset will pull you out of where you are and into where you want to go. Think about this. The majority of people are slaves to their current reality. If they're broke, they think broke. If they're in debt, they think debt. If they're surrounded by limitation, they think limitation. Their minds become mirrors of their environment. But the people who rise, the ones who transform their lives, they don't let their environment dictate their vision. They let their vision dictate their environment. They imagine something greater. They embody it. They live as if it's already true. And then through consistent thought and action, they pull that future into reality. If you want to act like a billionaire, even when you're broke, you must shift your psychology right now. Stop identifying with being broke. Stop saying, I can't afford it. Stop saying, that's impossible for me. Start asking better questions. Instead of, can I afford this? Ask, how can I create the value to make this possible? That's how wealthy people think. That's how creators think. They don't shut the door on possibility with limiting statements. They open the door wider with empowering questions. When you carry a billionaire mindset, you don't see obstacles the same way. Most people see a wall and turn back. A person with the right mindset sees a wall and says, how do I climb it, break it, or build a door through it? That shift changes everything, because opportunities are everywhere. But if your mind is locked in scarcity, you won't see them. The moment you decide to adopt the thinking of someone who is already successful, you start noticing doors you didn't even realize existed. And let's be clear, this is not about pretending or faking it. This is about embodying the principles, the thinking patterns, the habits of those who already have what you want. You might not have the money, but you can have the discipline. You might not have the network yet, but you can develop the mindset that attracts the right people. You might not have the luxury, but you can carry the gratitude, the vision, and the hunger. That's real wealth. Because when your mind shifts, your reality must follow. Think about the greatest entrepreneurs, leaders, innovators. They didn't sit around waiting for permission. They didn't say, one day when I have money, I'll be bold. No, they acted bold before the results came. They dreamed big before anyone else could see it. They walked into rooms they didn't belong in yet, with a certainty that one day they would. And that certainty is magnetic. It pulls people in. It builds momentum. It attracts opportunity. If you're broke right now, you might say, that's easy for them. They already made it. But rewind the tape. They weren't always there. They started where you are. They started broke, scared, uncertain. The only difference is they chose not to let their circumstances define them. They chose to let their vision define their actions. That's the key. The mindset always comes before the money. Let me give you an example. Two people are in the exact same situation, no money, struggling to pay bills, overwhelmed. One person says, this is who I am. I'm broke. I'll never get ahead. Life is unfair. They shut down possibility. They reinforce their identity as someone who's stuck. The other person says, this is temporary. I may not have the money yet, but I am resourceful. I am hungry. I am creative. I will find a way. One stays stuck. One moves forward. The situation is the same, but the mindset is completely different. And that difference determines the future. Your brain is a filter. What you choose to believe will shape what you notice, what you pursue, and what you attract. If you believe you're broke and that's who you are, you'll keep finding evidence to confirm it. If you believe you're wealthy in mindset, even when the money isn't there yet, you'll start noticing opportunities. You'll start acting differently. You'll start speaking differently. You'll carry yourself with a different energy. And people respond to that energy. Doors open because you show up as someone who belongs in those rooms. The challenge is most people are addicted to their limitations. They get so used to their story of struggle that they don't realize they're rehearsing it every day, reinforcing it every time they talk about it. You've got to cut that addiction. You've got to break that pattern. You've got to choose a new story. Stop telling yourself you're broke. Start telling yourself you're building wealth. Stop telling yourself life is unfair. Start telling yourself life is happening for you, not to you. That shift is the seed of every breakthrough. Acting like a billionaire when you're broke doesn't mean spending money you don't have. It doesn't mean living beyond your means. It means carrying yourself with the mindset of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to create. It means making decisions based on vision, not fear. It means waking up every day with purpose, with gratitude, with hunger. That's free. You don't need money to decide how you'll show up today. You don't need money to control your attitude. You don't need money to set a bold vision for your life. And let me tell you this, if you can't master your mindset when you're broke, you'll never master it when you're rich. Money doesn't change who you are. It only magnifies it. If you're fearful and limited when you're broke, you'll be fearful and limited when you have money. If you're abundant, bold, and resourceful when you're broke, you'll be abundant, bold, and resourceful when the money comes. That's why the mindset must come first. Every day you have a choice. You can let your current circumstances define your future, or you can let your vision define your future. You can choose to think like the masses, or you can choose to think like the few who rise. That choice doesn't cost $1. It only costs commitment. So if you're sitting here right now thinking, I'm broke, I'm struggling, I don't know how I'll make it, understand this, you don't need money to start building wealth in your mind. You don't need a miracle to change your trajectory. You need a decision that says, I will think, act, and live as if my future is already here. When you do that, when you carry yourself with that energy, that certainty, that boldness, the world responds, opportunities appear, people take notice, momentum builds, and one day you wake up and realize you're no longer acting like a billionaire, you've become one. Here's the expansion. People believe they need resources to win. They think the difference between them and the people at the top is money or connections or access. They say, if I had their resources, if I had their opportunities, if I had their backing, then I could do something extraordinary. But that's a lie, because resources aren't what create wealth or success. It's resourcefulness. It's the ability to use what you already have, to stretch it, to multiply it, to turn nothing into something. That is the real power. That is what separates those who stay stuck from those who break through. You might not have money in your account right now, but you have time, you have energy, you have skills you've underestimated. You have people around you who, if you learn to lead, inspire, and collaborate with them, could open doors you've never imagined. You have access to knowledge, ideas, and opportunities that previous generations could never even dream of. You have more than you think. The problem is, when people are broke, they focus on what they don't have. They obsess over their lack. They say, I don't have enough money. I don't have the right education. I don't have the right connections. That mindset blinds them. But resourcefulness says, I will find a way. I will use whatever I have right now to take the next step. Think about every great innovator. They didn't start with all the answers. They didn't start with perfect circumstances. They started with hunger. They started with creativity. They started with the relentless ability to solve problems with whatever was in front of them. That's resourcefulness. And if you're broke, that's the skill you need to master, because when you master resourcefulness, resources will always follow. Let's break it down. If someone takes away your money, your possessions, even your job, you still have the ability to think, to adapt, to create, to connect. And that's worth more than any bank account, because money without resourcefulness disappears fast. But resourcefulness without money eventually creates wealth. This is why some people win the lottery and are broke again in 5 years. They had money, but they never developed resourcefulness. Meanwhile, people who start from nothing, who build themselves brick by brick, they can lose everything and rebuild it again because they own the skill, not just the result. Resourcefulness shows up in your decisions every single day. Do you say, I don't have the money for that book, that course, that opportunity, and stop there? Or do you ask, how can I find a way? Who can I ask? What can I trade? What skill can I leverage? What service can I offer? The first response shuts the door. The second response opens it wide. And every time you choose the second, you strengthen that muscle. When you study people who've created extraordinary success, you see this pattern over and over again. They took scraps and turned them into empires. They looked at rejection and found redirect and stop at no. They asked, what's next? That's resourcefulness. And here's the beautiful thing. It doesn't cost you a dime to start developing it. You don't need a mentor. You don't need an investor. You don't need a miracle. You just need a decision that says, I will not be limited by what I lack. I will multiply what I have. You already practice this more than you realize. Think about times in your life when you had your back against the wall. You figured something out, didn't you? You stretched every dollar. You made calls. You hustled. You borrowed. You improvised. You survived. That's resourcefulness. But surviving isn't enough. You can use that same skill to thrive. You can take that same energy and point it toward growth instead of just scraping by. And when you do that, everything changes. But here's the catch. Most people never test their resourcefulness because they avoid discomfort. They avoid risk. They want guarantees. They want safety. But growth doesn't live in comfort. Wealth doesn't live in safety. If you want to build something extraordinary, you have to step into uncertainty and say, even if I don't have all the answers, I will figure it out. That's resourcefulness at its core. It's the refusal to let circumstances decide your destiny. Let me tell you something powerful. The greatest leverage you'll ever have is not money. It's not technology. It's not even knowledge by itself. It's emotional resourcefulness. Because when things go wrong, and they will, your emotional state will determine whether you collapse or whether you rise. If you can stay calm under pressure, if you can stay creative when things are falling apart, if you can find humor when things feel hopeless, you are unstoppable. Because your emotional resourcefulness allows you to access solutions that fear, stress, and panic would have blinded you to. Think about it. How many times have you known what to do, but in the heat of the moment, fear took over and you froze? The answer was there, but you couldn't see it because you weren't resourceful emotionally. Developing that resilience, that ability to stay centered and creative when others are losing their heads, that's the real billionaire skill. Because money can vanish, markets can crash, but if you own your emotional state, you can rebuild again and again.